Asset tokenization, real assets and new business models.
My name is Megan Nilsson. I go by Crypto Megan. I'm a high-end crypto and NFT consultant for portfolios and Web3 strategy for companies, investors, and celebrities, currently on a world speaking tour. And let me just say, this conference is absolutely fantastic. We're really thrilled to have you all here, and we're striving to give you the best experience possible with some amazing content. And so, yes, without further ado, we're going to kick this panel off. We are going to discuss asset tokenization, real assets, and new business models with Arravind. Arravind, welcome to the fireside chat.
Thanks for having me, yeah.
So, kicking right into it, we've heard a lot about asset tokenization. We've even heard rumblings from BlackRock themselves that all stocks will be tokenized in the future. And when BlackRock speaks, people listen, the world listens. So what we're here to discuss today is, what is it about asset tokenization that's different than the regular real-world model, and what makes it more practical and a better use case for certain things? So to kick this talk off, Arravind, first of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can we go over a little bit about what asset tokenization is exactly? Can we explain the definition and what it means and what it does?
Right, so if you look at asset tokenization, this is a new breakthrough in blockchain technology, right? So if you can see the conventional systems, anything such as any assets or commodities, they can be tokenized. So literally what you're saying is they can be broken down into small pieces, and this makes it easier to own, this makes it easier to be transferred, and this makes the entire ecosystem more transparent. And we can see a lot of this happening. If you have your company shares, you have your stocks, this can also be tokenized. And this gives you the sense of ownerships, right? So ownerships can also be obtained by more people at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, actually, now that we talk about ownership and fractionalization, I just launched a podcast on my Crypto Megan YouTube channel to host industry leaders and celebrities doing meaningful things in this space. And one of the things I just discussed with 𝐍𝐤𝐬𝐬, who's the co-founder of Animoca Brands, is digital ownership. And fractionalization also we talked about. And imagine if the Mona Lisa could be fractionalized. Actually, maybe you would get more value out of that Mona Lisa than its real true value today as one piece. So there's so many instances where tokenization and fractionalization makes sense. But first, we need to go into the inner workings of what it does and what it actually is. So it allows you to own essentially shares of something or pieces of something, and makes it more transparent.
Right.
Correct?
So let's take that example of Mona Lisa, right? So Mona Lisa right now it's priceless, but imagine there's a price on it. Let's say it's $1 million US. And you can only transfer it to one owner or the other, right? But once you tokenize it, let's say each pixel of the Mona Lisa, right? You tokenize and you can have multiple owners now of that same Mona Lisa, right? So those are the benefits that someone gets. Someone can participate into the fine arts industry. And if you're looking at land, you can tokenize your land title. You can tokenize it, you can break it down into multiple pieces, you can have multiple owners now. And yeah, so I think that's what basically sums up tokenization.
Yeah, so you can have multiple owners who understand their exact ownership, and they can be part of a community. And that brings me to the next question, because I'm very deeply entrenched in the Web3 space and the crypto space. And if any of you have ever been involved here in the NFT space back last year, I mean, many games and many types of projects tried to tokenize things, and it didn't work out so well. So why is it? Is it hard? Is it difficult? Why do things not work out when they try to tokenize them initially? What are some of those reasons?
I think one of the main reasons I see, firstly, the technology is new. There's a lot of understanding that has to happen before you can step into this. And it also adds a level of complexity to your existing system, right? And then you have the regulations. There is no clear regulations on how can this be done. So I think a lot of companies had actually just jumped the gun. They have gone ahead full steam. We don't really have a platform for these assets to be tradable as well. Liquidity has been low. And I think that is why most of these companies fail, in my opinion. I have personally been involved in a failed project as well. And one of these reasons had contributed to it.
So what was one of the reasons that it didn't succeed?
One of the reasons were, there were a lot of flaws in the smart contract itself. Since the technology is relatively new, the flaws can easily be exploited if it's not been audited well. There can have loopholes. So the assets that I had personally purchased were, transferred to someone else out of instance. So these are the flaws that can happen.
Yeah, and I think it's important for everybody who wants to tokenize business assets and kind of like change the way we do business to understand what's the difference, why tokenize something instead of just keeping it the traditional system.
Right, okay, let's take my business for instance, right? Let's say I want to raise capital. And the fastest way is to tokenize my shares, my equities in the company. So once I tokenize my equities, I can, immediately open it up to a larger community compared to retail sophisticated investors or angel investors. I can have more people own a piece of my company. And I think for global companies, for MNC companies, I think this should be the way forward for people like us who want to participate in the growth of those companies. And that is why tokenization should be taken in as a consideration, especially when they are listing their shares and going into IPOs.
Yeah, and a lot of that tokenization is done by way of a DAO, correct?
Right.
So can we give the audience the definition of a DAO and maybe how that works?
Right, so a DAO is a decentralized or distributed autonomous organization. So what they do, they have a council, they have the DAO members, and so a DAO is relatively as a normal association as you would put it, but it doesn't have an entity, and it's governed internally by the tokens. So every of the assets that has been tokenized in a form of a DAO, because there has to be a certain form of governance, there has to be a certain voting involved, there has to be certain policies in place, and in order to maintain the value of those assets.
Right, and actually DAOs are really interesting to me because they allow for the people to govern and to communicate and to build amongst themselves from the ground up, not the top down. And so one example of that is Bored Ape Yacht Club. I don't know if you've all seen the monkey NFTs, but it's so much more than a monkey JPEG or picture. It's a whole club, it's a membership. I'm a part of Bored Ape Yacht Club, and I've seen how the DAO works, and there's tokens. We are all governing that system through our tokens, that we hold as a share in that company, in that DAO. So we can vote on proposals. We can literally shape the way the future goes and not have it dictated by the few who are in power. And it's actually very empowering for the people, and it's an interesting way to run the community. So that's one really cool asset tokenization. I mean, that's one reason to have a token within your system, is to allow people to help with the governance and the voting and to be a part of that system, right? And then on the flip side, we can also tokenize different types of companies and organizations within the traditional systems that we have now. I know you have some really cool examples of those.
Right, so this was in Bali. I was invited last year to Bali to participate in a property launch, right? A new real estate launch, but this was a little bit different. Each of the units of the real estate of this hotel was tokenized, right? So there can be 7 owners to each unit, and you can own a piece of it. So that was something really interesting to me because for me to afford the entire unit might not be possible, but now to just own a portion of it and earn time shares out of it, I think it was quite interesting, and that was one of the projects which I participated, and this was late last year, but unfortunately the project did not succeed, right? The project had a lot of flaws, there was errors in the governance, but it was something new for me, and it was something that I think everyone should explore, right? And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, okay, so you said that it was a cool idea, but it didn't work out, and there have been a lot of attempts to tokenize things. From my experience as someone deeply involved in this community, what it takes to have a successful launch with a token is building that community and making sure that all the community is educated and that you have a proper education on what a DAO is. And for me, the reason why I bring up Bored Ape Yacht Club is because it's the perfect example of how community members work together day in and day out to make that work. And generally, when you're a company and you're going to launch a token, if you don't have that infrastructure of community, of people who want to be a part of it, it's not going to work out because it needs to be sustainable, right? And I think that's the main problem with asset tokenization, is not making it sustainable from the get-go by building that community first, right?
Right. I think I would say the same for the ICO market. That the bull market in 2017, where everyone was trying to launch their own tokens without creating the community, as what you have mentioned, and we saw a lot of projects succeed, but at the same time, there were more that failed, right? So I think building the community has always been the most challenging part, educating them, keeping them in the loop, keeping them excited, and markets can be volatile, right? And keeping them engaged during the downtimes are equally as important, right?
Yeah, can you give us another example of maybe one of the tokenized assets that you've invested in or seen that's interesting?
Yeah, so I think here in the Philippines, if you know 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐬𝐬 Island, so this is one of the islands where they have partnered with one of the villas, and they have they have released NFTs. I've not read in depth about it, but I think it's a really interesting initiative because now you can own a part of the 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐬𝐬 villa. You can have timeshares from it, and it's something that I'm looking to explore, and it's happening right here in the Philippines.
That's very cool, an island in the Philippines, huh?
Right.
So basically what you're saying is you have to really understand the team who's behind it, the mission, the goal, and how it's structured. There's a lot of intricacies in having a successful token that really has a use in your system or utility in your system. And I'm going to discuss one with you now that I've never discussed at any other conference before, because we have the pleasure of having this be a fireside chat. So I was just in Morocco for a very exclusive conference at the King's Hotel with the Moroccan ambassadors, and we were discussing a new project, I'll call it an undertaking, called Tomi. And Tomi is a whole decentralized internet infrastructure. So basically you can access this from anywhere in the world. Nobody will be blocked, it's not censored, but there's a DAO, and there's a treasury, and those tokens are what's used to make the system go round. So basically, those tokens are what you invest to mint new domains, because it's just beginning. So you can mint things like Nike.com, Apple.com on this decentralized internet infrastructure. So it's super cool. And those tokens that you use to mint, those Tomi tokens, they go back into the treasury when you mint. So it's very important that those tokens have a real utility and that there's a real community behind them and a real structure about it and a reason to have the token, not just to have the token to have the token. So this Tomi decentralized internet infrastructure is really interesting. It's also a browser, it's a wallet, all decentralized, and it's really incredible. I'll be talking more about that at my booth and also running giveaways for Tomi tokens on a ballet card, so you can come and see me at my booth. But I just wanted to give that as an example of using a token when it matters, to allow the community to have a voice and to have a say and to vote. And I can't stress this enough. If you're a company that's going to launch a token just to launch a token, it's most likely not going to work out. There has to be a whole thought process behind this, an incentive and a way for it to maintain its value, or else people aren't going to use that. What utility does that token actually have? And in this case, if you're buying into fractionalized shares of something, then that's your shares, right? In other cases, you have governance in a DAO. So really, what we need to take a look at here is what is the use case for this and how does it actually elevate your company? What's the difference between keeping it Web 2 or going to Web 3? Let's go to that question. Why not just keep it the way it is?
Keeping it the way it is, there are a lot of middlemen, right? So we want to eliminate those. I think those are one of the main things that we want to eliminate. It reduces administrative costs, definitely, because the DAO takes care of the entire system. And you're also looking at it makes it easier for you to transfer these assets. So a lot of challenges that had been in the Web 2 world can be solved with tokenization. And one of the examples is I didn't have to go through the whole process of signing an S&P or going through the bank to get my credit score checked. And if I have enough of those tokens, I can immediately get into purchasing these assets with a very low entry barrier. Right.
Yeah, low barrier to entry. That's interesting. You can also tokenize real estate in the way that you can invest in these shares, or also just buy real estate outright with crypto, right? Which is much easier than removing the middleman, and that's also something that I'm working on. enabling crypto payments in different parts of the world for luxury villas or high-end places where people want to use their crypto that they've made gains on since the beginning when they bought it, and there's nowhere to spend it. I mean, that's the real ideal vision here, is that we can spend our crypto, that we can transact, interact, but there must be a purpose. And a DAO is one of the most effective ways in running that, depending on what your goals are as a company and what you're trying to build, right?
Right. So I think if you are looking at DAOs, the most successful DAO, it's Ethereum, right? You can see how the ecosystem is governed. You can see how the voting is happening. You can see all the Ethereum improvement proposals that are coming out in the DAO. And I think this model, if it's replicated to any entity who's looking to tokenize their assets or real estate, collectibles, if this model were to be duplicated, I think they will go a very long way.
Yeah, and another thing I thought about, which is a good use case for people who are trying to run affiliate systems even. Just simple affiliate systems. Imagine right now our affiliate systems is, you sign up with my link and I'll give you a backend so you can see everybody that's signing up, maybe you see them all, and then we have to pay you out at the end, and depending on when we pay you out. What if there was just a system to where there was a smart contract, and immediately after that action executed of the affiliate, the tokens hit their wallet. And there's no question about how many people have I onboarded, what's going on, when will you pay me? I mean, this is what blockchain was invented for, to make it fast, easy, efficient, and transparent, super transparent. This whole place is about traffic, right? We're talking traffic. How do we make affiliates happy? We get them instantly paid based on when the transaction is verified on the blockchain with a smart contract. And there is nothing in the Web 2 world that can replicate that model.
Right. I think it's interesting when you talk about affiliate, because I run an e-commerce store, right? So we are one of the largest hardware wallet resellers throughout Southeast Asia. So we do international shipment, we do affiliate system. But as you mentioned, probably it's easier said than done, right? So when we try to implement, there are a lot of levels of complexities. There has to be a separate division set up for it. There has to be an education to it. There has to be a lot of beta testing. And then you have the community aspect of it. So we have all these challenges where navigating it might take some time. But as you mentioned, definitely it's going to be the best way forward.
Yeah, I think it's much harder, obviously, for Web 2 companies to adopt this model. If you're Web 3 native, it's much easier. Specifically, what I was referencing is the affiliate process in Tomi that I was talking about earlier. When you can see that those tokens are instantly deposited to your wallet based on the action that you did, it's much faster and much more clear for everybody involved. So I think all of these different use cases are really vital to companies transitioning to Web 3 to think about, not just tokenizing to tokenize, because that doesn't always work, right? And what else should we keep in mind? What about the tokenization of?
I think what we should keep in mind is tokenization is one thing, but the infrastructure to market this is another thing, right? We also need to look into platforms, whether platforms are ready. NFT was a thing during CryptoPunks and the rock, Ethereum rock. But there was not, until OpenSea came on board, that's when you see the volume started to pick up. And in terms of asset tokenization, we don't really have an exchange or a platform that holistically performs all these actions. So even with the best infrastructure, you have tokenized, you have the best governance, but if there's no infrastructure in place to facilitate this movement, then it's going to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, that whole question too. I hosted a conference in Paris not too long ago, and it was industry leaders, and it was a question of, does Web 2 have a place in Web 3, and how should we go about that? And one of the representatives from Google was there, and he was basically saying we need the scalable infrastructure that's built from Web 2 to help us make this movement bigger. Whether or not you agree, or if you're super Web 3 entrenched like I am, sometimes that is what we need, is that business grade level of scalability and protection, right?
Right. So I think the newer tokens are working on that, on scalability. I think Ethereum is moving that. I think a lot of them are focusing on scalability, like the recent 𝐶𝐿 that is out. And these are all new technology which has not been tested in large volumes, right? So once these are tested, once the regulators are happy, because eventually it has to go through the regulated market. If you're tokenizing an asset, if you're tokenizing a real estate, it has to go through a regulated. So scalability has always been the issue. How decentralized it is always been an issue. How secure is it has always been an issue. So this trilemma in the blockchain has people solving each section of it. Being on the right infrastructure is equally as important, and how Web 2 can transition into Web 3. Yes, Web 3 has got a lot of catching up to do. Nevertheless, the money is in Web 2, and we need to slowly start channeling the money into Web 3.
Yeah, I think there's so many different use cases about how we could go about this, even for creators. Tokenization can be really powerful. How many of you, or any of you in the audience, are thinking about tokenizing your company, or you as a creator introducing a token to your economy? Anybody? I know this is a really tricky thing to do, so for creators it can be really powerful as well, for your community to be able to vote and have a say in maybe what the kind of content you make, or also play into your affiliate system, your loyalty system. There are so many different ways we could go about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think back in my country, they are trying to experiment on tokenizing our driving license, right? So it becomes something immutable, it becomes something that stays on the blockchain. So these are the experiments that they are currently sandboxing. And I feel there has to be more sandbox, right? There has to be more trial and error, more, they should be given a space. The regulators should give a space for people to try out new ideas, to try out new innovations and see how it pans out, yeah.
So let's talk about BlackRock for a minute and the flow of money and the tokenization of stocks. What do you think that's going to do for the industry once stocks are tokenized?
I think it's going to take a long time for that to happen, right? It's not going to happen in the next 1 or 2 years. But of course, the liquidity will greatly improve. People like us who are on this side of the world can participate in those tradings. We don't have to go through an intermediary, a stockbroker, and I think it gives more access to the retail market compared to the institutional market. And yeah, that is going to take the prices somewhere else.
So what are you working on right now in your company?
So yeah, so we are, as I mentioned, we are one of the largest hardware wallet resellers. So we work with brands like Ledger, Trezor, Full Wallet to distribute these products throughout Southeast Asia. And I also lead the Malaysian Blockchain Association. So we work on policies, on frameworks, and work a lot with regulators to create this safe space for innovations to happen. So those are the things that we are currently working on, and asset tokenization is definitely one of the things that we are trying out. And yeah, let's see where it goes.
So what are some of the regulation talks around asset tokenization?
Okay, so back in my country, there has no...
And where, can you repeat your country, by the way?
Malaysia.
Malaysia.
Yeah, I'm living right next door. So yeah, so right now we are in a regulated market. We have 4 regulated exchanges in Malaysia. IEO is already legalized. You can raise funds through tokens in Malaysia. I think that's one of the biggest things that you can. So now it's about...
So you can do your IPO,
yes,
and that's
IEO.
totally
on tokens.
regulated there, and it's
Yes.
totally fine.
So yeah, so custody license is already being issued. So you have the entire ecosystem in place. So now it's all about that entity who is willing to tokenize to fulfill those criteria, and they can do their token launch in Malaysia itself.
What are some of those criteria?
Okay, so one of those criteria is your minimum paid up capital, it's the team behind it. You're also going to look at the audit companies who are involved in auditing your contracts, who are the target markets, and they will have to go through a sandbox and to see whether if these contracts can be exploited or if this is something that solves a problem, right? So basically, they left it open. You can just go in, put in your application, and we will be there to consult each company along the way on their way to getting themselves regulated or raising their capital. So I think we are in the right direction, but we have not gotten any companies who stood up. The regulation was just announced last year. So I think moving forward, we will see a lot of new innovations happening back in my country. Yeah.
So no country has passed that regulation point yet. Is that what you, no, sorry, no project.
No project has passed that regulation point yet, but we will soon see it because we just got 2 exchanges who are authorized to do these exchange offerings. And since they were just recently authorized, I think we have to wait up for the projects to come in and submit themselves.
The exchanges need to get that regulation as well
Right.
for the projects to be able to go through those exchanges.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that's interesting. That's pretty ahead of the game compared to most countries, right?
Yeah, I was back in Europe last month. I was at BTC Prague, and I had a chance to go through many countries and many other conferences there, and we see how the mindset of the European compared to Asian is completely different. They can't accept the fact that we work with regulators. They can't accept the fact that we build policies and frameworks for regulators around the space. So, and in the European side, it's more about being decentralized. It's about self-governance. It's about self-custody. But here, I think the technology is being used in a completely different way. And those are the things that are really interesting to me, yeah.
That's really interesting. So you're saying Europe narrative is more about decentralization and self-custody. And so what would you say is the difference with your country, with Malaysia, or this side of the world in that respect?
Right. So I think the problems being faced by Europe are not essentially the problems being faced here. I think our government has always been supportive. I think if you look in the Philippines, they are also a regulated market. Our governments have been subsidizing us in a lot of ways. So we are like the pampered people here, right? So, and I think by working with them, we get more things through. By working with them, I think they have always been on the side that, listens to us and try to work alongside us. And of course, consumer protection or investors protection is also something which has to be highly looked into. But other than that, they are completely open to explore new ideas with us.
So the difference is that the regulators want to work with people on the Blockchain Council
Right.
to come up with this regulation versus things like we're seeing in the US where one man decides the fate of everything.
Right.
Right? Like we won't name his name, but so that's a big difference. But I always say, how are we still using things like the 𝐿𝐻𝐬 test and this ancient test to govern and decide whether this new technology is decentralized or a security or not? I mean, it's like trying to fit a round peg into a square hole.
Right. I think this has always been an issue because if you look at Southeast Asia per se, in Malaysia, cryptocurrency is regulated as a security. In Singapore, it's regulated as payment, and I think in Indonesia, it's regulated as a commodity. So
wait, security?
Yes.
Commodity and
a payment token.
Payment token. So 3 different types of regulations across how many countries?
Across 3 countries.
So
right?
what is it regulated as in Malaysia?
We are regulated as securities in Malaysia.
Securities.
So when you go into the topic of payment, that's where you get stuck, right? So because when it goes in security, we are governed by the Securities Commission, but payments is governed by the National Bank. So we have got 2 different entities governing. And
so not all crypto has to fall under security.
Right.
Certain ones can fall under payments and others as commodities.
So in Malaysia, any crypto you own goes under security. So it falls under the Securities Act. So if you do payments via crypto, it is not regulated at the moment. So these are the initiatives that we are pushing through. But if you look at Singapore, for instance, you can use crypto as payment because it's already regulated. But crypto as a security, it's not regulated in Singapore. So they have a different identity. Crypto has a different identity, but you and I know, being in the space for long enough, you can't fit a circle into a square hole, right? So I think it has got a gender crisis. Yeah.
I think I just did a Twitter Spaces with Charles Hoskinson. He's the founder of Cardano. And that man is amazing. I mean, love or hate Cardano, his ideals and his vision and his thoughts for the way this space should be run and the integrity we need to see is absolutely amazing. You should all go check that Twitter space out. It's on my YouTube. But he says that why don't we come up with a system to measure levels of decentralization? Not all crypto and not everything necessarily falls under security, right? Like maybe we need to come up with a system to measure scientifically how decentralized it truly is and not just label everything under one belt. So I think that's what we're going to see in the future is coming up with a system that allows for us to
identify,
to know whether this is a security or not and not just default them all to the same category.
Right. Yeah, but as I mentioned, it might take a few years. The whole industry is still a work in progress. So it's going to be interesting to see what's to come in the years. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some interesting things to come, and asset tokenization is just getting started. So we're just working through the hurdles and jumping through the loops and trying to kind of like work in the dark, but everybody that's getting acquainted with this now is going to win long term, most definitely.
Right.
So what are some of your most exciting use cases that you've seen for asset tokenization? So we've discussed real estate. What else?
Capital to raise capital. I think that's another interesting area to explore. We see artworks, collectibles being tokenized, and I think it's limitless, right? I think anything can be tokenized, but whether it serves the utility, it serves the function, that is the question. But we see a lot of small communities, small projects who are onboarding because they don't have much to lose. This is something they can try, this is something they can move forward to. But we want to see this being absorbed in large entities. We want to see governments being involved. We want to see MNCs getting involved. So those are the things that the success of the smaller projects is going to determine whether the Web 2 companies or the larger entities going to buy the idea.
Yeah, so we're kind of like in trial and error right now.
Right.
And what about for voting, in countries? Tokenizing that and making that putting that on the blockchain. I mean, there's so many different ways we can go about this. And speaking of Charles Hoskinson, one of the funniest quotes he said in that interview was, he can make the American election system look like a toy with blockchain. So, I mean, like, we're there. We just need to start and get going on that path.
Right. I think voting has been on the pipeline for the longest time, but it's implementing it is being a challenge because coming back to education, coming back to regulations, right? And if you look at what they should do, probably it should start in smaller sections. It should start in a sandboxed hub, and then they can scale it to a larger. But if you look at India today, most of their votings are done online. Compared to us in Malaysia, we still have to go and put our finger in the ink and go and cross the person we want to vote for. But things are moving towards digital first, and then it should move into tokens.
Yeah, so we're moving a little bit more at lightning speed here in Web3, but we're waiting for, sort of the Web2 world we need to come together.
Right.
Right, in order to initialize and make this mass adoption happen. Right? We need to come together and make both sides understand why this is good. Look at the mistakes that projects have made and why they've failed. What's going on? What can we do better? How do we make this more secure? Right? Those are the things that we can have in mind for the future. Right.
So I think in terms of Web 2, the market cap is really huge compared to what's happening in Web 3. With new experiments going around Bitcoin now, you can launch an NFT on Bitcoin, being the most decentralized asset ever. I think the new ordinals is something that we really want to see what it can do. It claims to solve what Ethereum couldn't. So there are innovations continuously happening, right? It has to come to a point where something is adopted, right? Innovations can keep going, but somewhere along the way, one of this has to be adopted into mainstream. One of it has to be tested rigorously and say, yeah, this is the thing, this is what we want to move forward with. Because we have got so many different ecosystems. We've got the Ethereum, we've got the Polygon, we've got the, there's a lot of it. So there has to be something that's adopted and implemented on. So that's my take on this.
And I think a lot of, whether we like it or not, a lot of the Web 2 brands, the big Web 2 brands, are going to come in and give this more visibility. So it also depends on what they do and how they execute it and whether they come in and, we just had an example in the NFT community about Pepe. Pepe coin. There was one NFT guy who minted a small NFT for like $3 each, like 60,000 of them, and the whole community jumped in. But then some real players from the Web 2 audience jumped in and made it blow up and gave it much more visibility, and more people had eyes on it. So, we're gonna have to work together on both sides to bring that visibility to people who, I know Jasmine, I think, was saying it, we don't necessarily want to know how the technology works in depth or, everything that's going on under the hood. They just want it to be easy. They want to be able to join and they want to understand, and that's the credibility and the visibility that a lot of Web 2 brands, mega brands, can bring to this
I
place.
think that's something very interesting that you can see here in the Philippines because 𝐶𝐿, right, I think is one of their largest e-wallet providers in the Philippines with access to 79 million users has just jumped into 𝐃𝐿. So now imagine 79 million users have got a crypto wallet in their hand already. So adoption will definitely skyrocket. We have got Globe, which is their local telco here in the Philippines, also looking into going into the metaverse. They partner with a company called 𝐿𝐸, and they are working some things together. So these Web2 companies, when infrastructure-based Web2 companies get into the space, that's when you'll see adoption skyrocketing and more people getting involved in the space. Yeah.
Yeah. So 𝐃𝐿𝐬, tell us a little bit more about that as we're wrapping up in the panel.
Right. So yeah. So I'm not a Filipino, and 𝐃𝐿𝐬 is not open to foreigners. So, but I've got my chance to use it, to explore it. So 𝐃𝐿𝐬 is a e-wallet payment system. As we know, Philippines is largely underbanked, and they gave access to millions of them the banking capacity. So it's a digital bank now. And recently they just launched a new product called 𝐃𝐿𝐸. I think they partnered with an exchange called PDEX, if I'm not mistaken. And now everyone on the app soon enough should be able to buy and sell crypto. I think this is going to be the first step to mass adoption, right?
That's really cool. And sometimes the leapfrog effect when people go directly from unbanked to crypto.
Right.
That's also a really incredible phenomenon. So really cool. This has been an amazing discussion. What's next for you? What's next on the roadmap?
Yeah, so what's next on the roadmap is, I think back in my country, I have got these proposals to push payments through, to get payments regulated, to make payments and remittances something more streamlined. So that's next for me. And of course, as the topic suggests, we are also looking at getting more assets tokenized. We are looking to get land titles tokenized. And, we are starting off with our driver's license. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't wait to see the evolution of what happens there in Malaysia. What's next for me? I'll be continuing with the podcast and with AIBC to Malta and Cyprus, and I'll be doing several more panels and a keynote here throughout this time. As far as asset tokenization, I'm running a really cool giveaway at my booth, which is right down here. I would love you all to stop by and say hi. And tomorrow I'll be doing live on-site a podcast with Clinton Sparks, who's one of the biggest DJs in the world. So please feel free and come say hi. We're going to discuss the movement of music and Web3, and it's going to be really fun and awesome. And I'm just really happy to see you guys all here today, learning and soaking it all in. So
thank you.
Thank you so
guys.
much.